The only possible way to achieve a goal is to have that goal be reasonable and to manage your expectations.
So is it realistic for you to set a goal of how big a buck you want to shoot on a property, whether you lease, rent, or own it, or just hunt on it and a friend's letting you do whatever you want? Well, yes and no.
I hate to pour cold water on you here, but guess what? Unless you own a 40 in a primo location, or a 20, or an 80, or a 120, even a 200-acre property, you're probably not going to be going ahead and shooting in a heck of a lot of 200-inch bucks off there. What you really have to do is you have to set reasonable goals.
The first thing you need to do is find out its historical background. And you do that by going to Boone and Crockett or Pope and Young. Pope and Young is the archery record-keeping organization, and Boone and Crockett records all trophies. You can look through past recorded trophies and see if the county produces any big bucks, but make sure you check the dates.
If the county you're in isn't killing a 160-inch buck every single year, well, you know what? Setting a goal that you're going to kill a 160-inch buck each year probably isn't a realistic goal.
There are 4 main elements that come into play if you want to manage for trophy or mature bucks. Of course, age, how old is the buck and how old can you get bucks on that land? Genetics, whoo, that is huge. Habitat, do you have enough refuge and escape cover and enough food? And finally, herd density. How many deer are around? And do you have enough deer to so-called play with to grow a few up into those huge proportions?
As a matter of fact, when it comes to inches of antler, so much of it has to do with genetics, nutrition, luck of the draw, age, that managing for inches is tough. You're much, much better off, generally speaking, managing for age, trying to get deer to a certain specific age.
You also need to know what's going on around you. What are the neighbors doing? If you can get a few of your close neighbors involved in quality deer management, then you have a better chance of producing big bucks on your own property. Because any buck that wanders off, and those 2.5-year-olds and 3.5-year-olds and 4.5-year-olds, they're the players, they want to wander off, they're going to get shot if they cross the fence. But if everyone has the same game plan, then those 4 elements, they can come into play and you can start producing mature bucks. Not necessarily Boone and Crockett bucks, but older bucks, and a few of them might hit the goals you set for your land.
So you've got the age, genetics, habitat, and density issues addressed. Now, how many does do you want in the herd?
There's a ton of misinformation out there these days about what healthy sex ratios is. For one thing, there's nothing normal or healthy about a 1-to-1 buck-to-doe ratio. It does not exist naturally in nature. Nature is much harder on the males than it is on the females. You know, buck fights are very, very hard on bucks. The rut itself, even if you're not getting in a fight, mature bucks tend to lose 25 to 30% body weight during a little over a month of the year. Add all that stuff up together and the mortality rate on bucks is much higher than it is on does. So no, a 1-to-1 buck-to-doe ratio is not natural, and frankly, it's not healthy either. The reason it's not healthy is because the tighter you get those buck to doe ratios, the harder those bucks are competing for those does. What's a far healthier buck to doe ratio is 1.5 to 2.5 does for every buck. That way the competition is not as ferocious.
So instead of going for that big score, just try to go for a big buck. Grow an old buck and you'll be happy with the result, because every so often, one of those older deer, he's gonna have that big scoring rack you love.
When we come back,
Oh, and there comes the doe right there. And we got a doe tag. Let's go.
Land of Whitetail is brought to you by Cuddyback. CuddyLink, 16 cameras, 1 cell plan, $10 a month. By Thompson Center, America's master gunmaker. Get armed and deadly with Easton FMJ arrows. And by Matthews Archery. Visit sportsmansguide.com today and see why they're the place to go to get where you want to be outdoors. Find the very best deals on the latest gear for hunting, shooting, camping, and everything else under the stars to fuel your passion. Shop sportsmansguide.com.
this week we're talking about deer management, and more importantly, about managing your expectations when it comes to growing those deer. Steve Bartilla knows a thing or two about this subject.
One of the biggest mistakes that hunters/managers make is in their expectations. Generally speaking, you're better off managing for age than you are for inches, because inches, so much of it's a crapshoot. Age, well, this 2.5-year-old buck, if he gets another year on him, he will be a 3.5-year-old next year. Versus this 120-inch buck, if I give him another year, well, he could be 110 inches next year.
To help demonstrate this point, we caught up with Steve during the shotgun season in Illinois. He's hunting one of the properties he manages, and he's looking for a management buck, which is to say, one that lacks superior genetics and has no real trophy potential.
I just rolled a management buck. He's laying right over there. I'll tell you what, this has been a blast. That's the third buck I've seen. Frankly, one of them I wanted to kill. I followed him in. If I'd had my gun loaded and wasn't carrying all this stuff, I think I would have killed him on the walk in. But then I wouldn't have got any of it on film. Not that that's the end of the world for me, but you know what, when it comes to firearms hunting, I like to bring you guys along when I can. And man, to me, firearms hunting is a blast. This is fun. This right here is the picture perfect management buck. No brows, not much for tine length, no beams, 3.5 years old, perfect, mission accomplished. What you really have to do is you have to set reasonable goals. I set goals high. I set them high as I reasonably believe that I can achieve them. In order to figure out what you can actually produce on your 40, your 80, your 120, your 240. Take a stock of what's going on in the area.
Right there is the picture perfect management buck. And I know this is gonna sound ridiculous. I couldn't be happier. He is the buck I wanted to kill. He doesn't even go 100 inches. Shooting management bucks is not for everyone, frankly. Honestly, it's not for most people. What I enjoy doing, though, is managing properties for clients. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm managing. Oh, and there comes the doe right there. And we got a doe tag. Let's go. Now we're done for the night. Got that one doe laying there. The other one just off in the food plot. Whew. I'm telling you, shotgun hunting, oh man, is it ever fun. Freezer's full, gonna donate another one. It's time to start getting ready to tag some deer and get the heck out of here, load them up. Thanks for coming along with me.
When Steve comes back, he hides out in the corn.
Blending it in with the corn. It's almost not even fair.
When Deer and Deer Hunting returns.
Land of Whitetail is brought to you by 10-Point Crossbow Technologies. There is no substitute. By Sever Broadheads, straight through it. I scent killer gold with Hunt Dry Plus technology. Apply it, dry it, and go hunt. B&W Trailer Hitches Tow and Stow, the last trailer hitch you'll ever need.
We're back in Illinois following Steve Bartilla on one of his management hunts. This time his focus is on a cut cornfield.
Where it's legal. Driving down corn and then putting up a ground blind on the edge of it and blending it in with the corn. It's almost not even fair.
Steve is here to thin a few does out to balance the buck to doe ratio on this property. Given this setup, it shouldn't prove too difficult. The shot on this doe looked good, so Steve was content to sit back and wait for more. Before long, the does were back, and he was ready to fill doe tag number 2. After tagging this first doe, Steve was on his way to find the second.
We're back up on the field. I'm glad we went after that one right away, because that would have been a tough track job in the dark. This other one, I don't think it's going to be quite so tough. Here's where she's going. Right here. There. Oh, there she is. That is the way Blood Trail's supposed to go. I knew I smoked her. This one here was easy. I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna get the truck, I'm gonna get my stuff.
If you only control a normal size property, what I would suggest in those situations is just go out there and have fun, shoot what makes you happy.
Instead of having your goal to maybe grow a 170 net typical class whitetail, which by the way is pretty cool, you really should be setting just trying to grow deer and let them be as old as they can be. The genetics thing, that'll play out. You're gonna find out soon enough how big a buck you can grow. But you will have that satisfaction of knowing you've brought a 2.5-year-old or a 3.5-year-old deer up to that 4.5-year-old or 5.5-year-old or beyond range. Grow an old buck and you'll be happy with the result.
One of the biggest things that we can do to improve our hunting ground is simply not hunt specific areas. What I'm talking about is setting aside the majority of our deer cover as sanctuary. This goes against absolutely everything we think we know as hunters. I mean, man, growing up, it is just pounded in your head. You gotta get deeper, you gotta get deeper, you gotta go deeper and further into the woods. And every single time we do that, we are leaving telltale signs behind that we're out there hunting them. Every single time we're going out in the woods, we're leaving odors, we're spooking deer, we're kicking them up. What we're doing is we are training them to be more nocturnal. We're doing this type of stuff during the daylight, so they need to shift their activity more to nighttime. Deer truly are not nocturnal animals, but by trashing their deer woods, what we end up doing is we end up training them to be more nocturnal. One of the biggest mistakes we make as hunters is hunting too darn much of our ground. When you can go ahead and produce food like this, and you leave that deer cover alone, what ends up happening is the does and fawns end up coming out during legal shooting light. Mr. Big is back there in the timber. He's watching them. They're safe, they're safe. All right, I'll still wait till after dark. And then they'll do it again and again and again until all of a sudden they decide, you know what? I can step out and I can get me some food. And you happen to be sitting there waiting for them. We train them on our ground. You can move during daylight hours because we are not disturbing the woods. We are placing such high importance on low impact. As those deer feel pressure, where do they go? They go to those areas that they feel safe. When you got the food, when you got the deer cover, when you got that feeling of safety, more often than not, that becomes your ground.
I think the jury's still out on whether the sight of a trail camera actually spooks some deer. You know, there are hunters that say absolutely they do, and other hunters will tell you, no way. I think the truth's probably somewhere there in the middle. But I think we can all agree that there's no harm in trying to make our trail cameras as inconspicuous as possible. And I'm not just talking about spooking deer. Trail cameras are expensive, and anything you can do to keep them out of the hands of thieves should be a high priority for you as well. So we're going to look at a few ways that you can make your cameras just a little bit less noticeable in the woods. You know, larger trail cameras like this one, they have a large profile and they tend to really stick out, especially if you're out in the open like this, if you've got a bait site here or a trail going by. This is how a lot of people set them up. Now this is going to be a lot less detectable than this larger model. And as you can see, sometimes camel doesn't always blend in with the environment it's in. That's why with this cutty back and with other models, sometimes brown, something that simulates the tree bark is going to be a lot less noticeable. But another thing I'm going to do in a situation like this, I'm going to back off into the woods, maybe 10 yards, try to find another tree back here where I can still cover the area, but my camera isn't sticking out there in plain sight. That way anybody who's just walking by or a deer's walking by, he's less apt to pick up on that trail camera. Okay, another thing you can do to make your camera less conspicuous, and again, to break up that outline, because that's what the eye catches, is to use branches or natural vegetation to help it blend in just a little bit better. Maybe use a little bit of tree bark here and there. Just another nice way to break up that outline. Another great way to get your camera out of view is to get it up off the ground, maybe 6, 7, 8 feet. That way, any deer that are passing by, any trespassers that are passing by, are very unlikely to see it. And now I've got that trail covered, but my camera's back in the woods and it's up about 7 feet. Having trouble with camera thieves? Try deploying a decoy camera. Simply take an old broken down camera and place it in an obvious site. Then place a concealed working camera high up in the tree to gather images of the perpetrator. This intel can then be shared with your local conservation officer. So anything you can do to keep deer and thieves from detecting your trail cameras is time well spent. With just a little bit of effort, you can keep deer from seeing your cameras and thieves from walking away with them.